What's up guys, Bo here. In this entry, I want to expand on a concept that I introduced to you in a previous entry about discernment, this concept of discernment, which basically means being able to tell apart which tool or which kind of process that we to take to solve which kind of problem area, or to fit which application. Basically, that's discernment, and it's something that we build through experience. And I applied it to logic and emotion, or sensitivity. So basically, it's separating those two functions based on the application. And in this entry, I want to introduce this idea of discerning between actions, thoughts, and being, right? And this is an area that, like logic and emotion, a lot of people have hang-ups over. There is a bit of confusion and a bit of overlap between these areas, and which causes people to basically make subconscious mistakes in life, in terms of like the decisions they make, and just generally how they perceive reality. And I'll just start off by going through each one, just defining each one, and then I'll go on to explain what significance this holds, and the common kind of pitfalls that people fall into by mixing these up. Okay, and this isn't rocket science, right? So I'll start off with actions. Actions are self-explanatory. Like they do what they say on the tin. Essentially, they are what we do, physically. So walking is an action. Filming a vlog is an action. Singing, that's a bit out of tune, is an action. And they have a tangible result. So that's actions. Pretty self-explanatory, right? And then the second category is thoughts, right? And these are similarly self-explanatory. They are your mental constructs. They are your ideas, your beliefs, your projections, your judgments, your ideals, things like that. Everything that you visualize and paint within your head is part of your thoughts. And the last category is being, right? And this is a little harder to explain than the other two, in that it's not something that you can kind of express verbally. But essentially what being is that all of us, behind who we think we are, behind our skin and our thoughts and our beliefs, there is an essential quality that is kind of common across all of nature, that is essentially just beingness, you could say. It's just I am, it is just the essence of being alive. It goes beyond like identity and stuff like that. Okay, so those are the three categories, and people mix these up, right? But first I'll mention also where sensitivity ties into all of this, because that is the kind of general central theme that I put across in these videos. Sensitivity is essentially the merging of these things. It is the kind of the permeator of these three layers. It is what basically takes our essence and then kind of fills our mental constructs, and then from there we use our feeling to then translate that into action. So sensitivity and energy is what kind of permeates these layers and kind of realizes everything. So from a law of attraction kind of standpoint, feeling is what is the motor behind manifestation, right? So people mix these up because they are not in control of their energetic state, basically. A lot of people are insensitive to energy, and so to them certain paradigms, so certain kind of actions and thought patterns, they seem as though they're intrinsically linked, because people are unconsciously, they are unaware, they are unconscious of certain feeling states, or how they feel about certain things. And usually this is in the areas where they are they hold some kind of fear, or some other kind of dark negative emotional kind of paradigm, you could say. So to give you an example, someone who has a hang-up about food, someone who has a problem with food, like, they're overweight, they can't kind of control their eating impulses. To them, the thought of eating and the action of eating are conjoined. So basically, they can't see the separation between thinking about eating and actually eating, the actual physical act of eating. And that's because, again, they have an emotional blind spot to this. They don't realize that they have some kind of emotional drive, some kind of emotional impulse that basically triggers basically every time they think of eating, they usually end up eating. So the thought usually ends up as an action, because they have whatever, they have an emotional kind of impulse, right? But in reality, these two things, they're not connected, right? One's a thought and the other one's an action, right? Not every thought has to be actualized, right? That's the thing. And yeah, so essentially, I can give you a few other examples, such as any kind of addiction, really, or any kind of impulse, or anything that is kind of a bit taboo, like things that are of a sexual nature, for example. Like, I don't know, an example could be men think about sex, therefore they will have sex. They will like push for sex, basically. And again, it is this subconscious connection between those two things, the subconscious kind of conjoining of those two things, those two discrete phenomena, and kind of confusing them as being one thing, right? And yes, so that's the reason why people confuse these things, right? And essentially, in order to break a bad holding pattern, or in order to break a bad habit, we must look at the action and the thought and then make the connection between them, in the form of basically recognizing why, the emotional motivation behind why we are basically doing what we are doing, why we are erroneously conjoining these two things, thought and action, and then basically becoming aware of that. Because if we are unaware of the separateness, the independentness of these two things, then we are a slave to our thoughts, basically, essentially. We basically get agitated when we have certain thoughts, because to us there is no separation between thinking up the thing and acting it out, right? Impulses. And it is this lack of trust in ourselves to basically have self-control. So yes, there are actually, in reality, there is no thought that has to be actualized, like I said before. So just because you thought something up doesn't mean you have to do it. And that is something that I would invite you guys to basically think about, to analyze, to consider. In what areas do I basically fear the thoughts that I have, essentially? Like, that I feel that if I have that thought, Like, you know, if I think about food, if I think about sex, if I think about gambling, if I think about, it could be anything. It could be raping someone, it could be killing someone, I don't know, whatever, you know. But essentially it is, or you know, being blasphemous towards your God, or whatever, you know, or saying something to someone, you know. Whenever you have those thoughts that you kind of like, you try and sweep under the rug, and like, you know, you have that feeling of like, oh, I shouldn't feel like that, then basically that's basically an indication that you should look into that. Because in reality, there's really no obligation for you to actualize a thought or an idea. So you need to basically make that distinction and learn to discern between those two things in those problem areas in your life, right? And I haven't really mentioned the being aspect too much. Essentially, that is more to do with identity. And you know, that it also has to do with this horizontal kind of access to perception that I introduced in the previous entry. But basically, sometimes when people have certain belief patterns, beliefs, systems, and kind of thought patterns that are kind of self-reinforcing, and they might be kind of negative, or they cause frustration and anxiety and things like that. And then people basically, they conjoin the ideas of being and thinking. So basically, people start to identify. They overly identify with their thoughts and beliefs, right? And again, there is a separation between being and thinking. You know, thoughts and your essence, essentially. And so that's another area that you should look at. You know, if you have any thoughts or beliefs that are kind of unresourceful, you know, that they cause you pain, they cause you anxiety, they cause you suffering, then know that basically you are basically conjoining those two things when there shouldn't be. There is not really a connection there. There doesn't have to be a connection there, right? And as I said, being is basically the essence of life. You know, it goes beyond identity. It goes beyond, you know, your belief systems. It goes beyond anything that is that you hold conceptually. It is just the essence of being. And the way you can tap into this, it's getting pretty dark. The way you can tap into this is basically there's rain clouds rolling in. The way you can basically tap into this is to go to, one way is to meditate. So you can go for a jog. You know, the meditative exercise that I advocated to you guys in that vlog entry about exercise, and basically coming back to the present moment. So kind of dropping all of your worries and identifications, and coming back to the present moment and saying, okay, well, I'm alive. I'm able to think. You know, and basically just stripping back the layers, and then eventually, this is kind of what a lot of spiritual people refer to as enlightenment or unconditional love, like the state of just pure being, right? And it's just kind of a detachment from everything else, and just resting in your essence of being alive and existence. So okay, so I'm not going to ramble on too much more longer about this, but basically that's the concept. And I would invite you guys to basically look at those three different areas: your actions, your thoughts, and your being. Or really, I should have said that the other way around, because it's like kind of, you can do it from top to bottom. But look at those three kind of areas in your life, in your kind of thinking and things like that. And basically start to discern between those three things, because they are not conjoined, they are separate, right? So okay, hopefully that was helpful. I'm warming up a bit. But cool, I will see you next video. Peace.